And welcome everybody to the Justice News Break. And we are covering the Nick Reiner case today. And we are going to get into some major updates that have come about over the last week to 10 days since we reported on this last. We've got some substantial things to report on here, and we're going to get into all of it here in this segment today. Also, I want to make sure you're aware that the Justice is a Process website, that's www.justiceisaprocess.com. There are significant updates and articles over there that we're going to be getting into. We're going to be talking about. But if you really want the big details and the juicy details, dig into those articles. It's a substantial database of information that we've compiled over there as we've been reporting on these things as they've happened. But we're going to get into today's update, which is going to kind of cover everything that's occurred in the last 10 days and some important information you need to know as we roll into the arraignment and what this is going to look like for Nick Reiner. So let's talk about that, guys. Let's jump in and let's get into this very, very important information here. All right, guys. So the Nick Reiner case right now is heading to arraignment on the 7th. We're 10 days. We're about 10 days away from arraignment. And what's come out now, what's become clear is a couple of things. Number one, the family does not want an execution, meaning his brother and sister have come out publicly and made it clear they are not in support of the death penalty. And a man who went through a similar scenario as what Nick Reiner is about to face is has spoke out. He put an article out, and it's something I would encourage you guys to check it out. It's in Mad America, and it's quite interesting. We're going to get into those details, and there's other things that have occurred as well right before Christmas that we're going to get into. And there's a case, a very important case, specifically one Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal's son Redmond, who did something eerily similar to what Nick Reiner has done here. And his case will kind of tell us a little bit about where his case is heading. So, anyways, in the 2 weeks since they were found stabbed, and a lot's happened. So let's get into all of that right now. So there is 10 days, as I mentioned, until Nick Reiner faces arraignment. And there is some things that have come out that we need to talk about. First of all, the death certificates were released on the day before Christmas, Christmas Eve, and they confirmed that they dispelled one of the things we'd reported on early on here, which was there was a possibility that Michele Reiner might have been making a dying declaration. It does not appear that that is supported by the medical evidence, and that Billy Bush and the other individual who's reporting this has it wrong, heard bad information. But it appears that they died within, according to the death certificates, that they would have died within minutes of suffering multiple sharp force injuries. And the deaths are listed, times of death when they were declared as 3:45 p.m. for Rob and 3:46 p.m. officially for Michele. The reason why we can know that there's no way that Romy Reiner talked to her mother like was being reported is because we already know that at around 10, 11 in the morning, Nick Reiner's hotel room was discovered to be filled with blood. So we know the crime happened early morning, or much earlier than the times when their bodies were discovered. It's also since been announced that there will be a memorial service held at a later date, and that apparently there's going to be a private ceremony that's going to be attended by the likes of the Obamas, Billy Crystal, Larry David. Just give you an idea of just how important the Reiners are in the circles that they're running through. Now, it's also come out, Jake and Romy Reiner have made it very, very abundantly clear they are not in support of the death penalty in this case. They, according to family, friends, and members, they don't see him as a monster. They see him as someone who was failed by the mental health system. And I see that as well. They look at this as a catastrophic failure of mental health treatment. And my wife is a mental health nurse. She sees it every single day in and out. As she's told me how, these for-profit medical systems are not looking to solve problems. They're looking to, they get them to a point, they throw them back out, they bring them back in, and they make buco bucks off of this process that doesn't cure anything. It doesn't get rid of anything. It just puts you in a constant loop of medications, a constant of catch and release and catch and release until something catastrophic happens. And then you see where the criminal justice system goes. As everybody is being reporting right now, it is extremely hard to get a mental not guilty by reason of insanity in California and in many states and most states. And so then they end up becoming prisoners. And you know, it's a very, very sad state of affairs for the mental health system that we have in America. And this is a case because of the means, because of the money, because of the opportunities to be able to demonstrate that Nick Reiner, with all of the opportunities that he had from his parents' wealth, with all of the resources that they had, 18 visits to mental health facilities, and none of those facilities until right before this happened were looking at the mental health aspects. They were treating drugs. They didn't see schizophrenia, although that's something that apparently was being treated, as we reported in the previous article. That was something he was diagnosed with in the weeks prior to this happening. They were trying to get his medications right when this was let up. He was moved back into his parents' house because they wanted to keep an eye on him. And he had an episode, apparently, that then led to, obviously, this catastrophic incident where his parents lost their life. Terrible, terrible. But it's an absolute indictment of the mental health systems that were deployed to him and that failed him terribly. That is something I look forward to. And it also answers the question many people were asking, which is, how is he affording Alan Jackson? I think we know how now. His sister and his brother know that the parents would have wanted him to get, they would want him to have his due process in court. They would want him, and they would want to indict the system and to have the system held accountable as much as him, because they understand they had a son who had problems and that the system did not get the job done with, even though they poured millions, I'm sure millions or hundreds of thousands of dollars into this problem, and they didn't get it. They didn't get it rectified. It's something that I think is a severe indictment of the mental health system that we have and the failures that it creates and where it can go. Now, currently, where is Nick right now? He is in solitary confinement. He's being watched, we'll call it, and they're ensuring his silence. Right now, he's at the Twin Towers Correctional Facility in downtown Los Angeles. It's the world's largest mental hospital. It's the biggest mental hospital in the United States. It houses 40,000 prisoners, and nearly 40% of those prisoners are of some sort of mental health issue, or they've got some sort of mental health problem. So it is the largest facility that deals with mental health issues in the nation and in the world potentially. He is on solitary confinement right now. He's being required to wear his blue vest, which basically means it allows it so that nothing bad can happen. And right now they're ensuring he can't speak to anyone but legal counsel or authorized jail personnel who's authorized by his legal counsel. Police source also told People magazine that this is deliberate because they don't want anyone to compromise the high-profile case. They don't want any civilian or inmate to ask him questions. They want this to be a fair process, and they know the eyes of the world are watching. And apparently it's now been reported and confirmed that when he arrived at the jail, the health staff evaluated him and determined that he had a mental disability. So that is very, very important. And he's been put on watch. He's been put on observation until a doctor clears him, which they said could take a very, very long time. Now, it's also come out through the Daily Mail that this has been an ongoing situation. Again, something highlighting the failures of how these mental health crises are managed and dealt with. The police were out to the house in 2013, 14, 17, twice in 2019, and then you count the day, of course, the incident that this occurred. And they've ranged from, where there was, it was a violent episode to a welfare check to mental health checks. So this was a crisis that was going on over a decade, and it's now become extremely clear that Nick Reiner was failed by the system that's supposed to be designed to protect him. Now, the big question that's come up is the insanity defense question. Legal experts are weighing heavily in on this right now, and we're going to get into what that looks like for Nick Reiner, because there's a case out there, the Redmond O'Neal case, which is really eerily similar to Nick's. But the thing you need to understand about mental health defenses in California is that you have to prove the difference between disease or defect. It doesn't matter. You have to prove that they did not understand the nature of the consequences of the actions. You have to show that they didn't know right from wrong at the moment that they did it. You can't just show, hey, he's got schizophrenia. Hey, he's got this, he's got these issues. You have to demonstrate that at the moment he did it, he did not understand right from wrong. And it's a tall hill to climb for the defense, but it's with a lawyer like Alan Jackson, it's not impossible to climb that hill because it's one that it's why you would hire Alan Jackson or a lawyer like Alan Jackson so that they can climb that hill with you. Now, as I mentioned, the Redmond O'Neal parallel in this case, we've been tracking that. We have an article. I'm going to pull that article up as well because we get into a lot of details on that. So I'm going to do that right now. But the Redmond O'Neal case is a case that I think everyone should look into and everyone should take a look at because there's interesting parallels to this case. And also, interestingly enough, it's a case that Redmond O'Neal is about to go back to court. He was just deemed okay for to be okay and competent to stand trial and to go through the process of a trial. So he's going to be back in court, and we're going to get into that right now as far as what he went through and what this looks like, and get into all that. All right, so we're going to get into that here. Now, this is an article that we had put up on the 23rd of December, so I'd invite you to go back and take a look at this article because it's an important one. And we're going to get into some of what we reported in this. In this particular article, this is one we were talking about, and it was brought up, and it was coming to being reported on regarding the Redmond O'Neal case. Now, the Redmond O'Neal case is one that is eerily similar to what is happening with Nick Reiner right now. He went on a knife rampage. He stabbed people, five people over a number of days back in May of 2018. Luckily he didn't kill anyone, but he was taken into custody. He was taken to Twin Towers. And when he was evaluated, they found schizophrenia, bipolar, and antisocial personality disorder. And then when he went to court, he was declared incompetent to stand trial. Now, in California, when you're declared incompetent to stand trial, you can only be incompetent for 2 years, and then they either commit you or they have to dismiss the charges. In this case, they were not dismissing the charges; they committed him. So he spent 7 years, the last 7 years, at this hospital right here, Patton State Hospital. It's where I believe Nick Reiner will be going as well, if what happens. If what I think happens at his arraignment happens, which is that I believe, based on the fact that we have a sealed report, we have all reports coming out are that he has been declared to have a mental defect, that they're going to ask and they're going to raise the issue of competency at his arraignment. And at that time, the judge will then have to make a ruling and a determination, and he will be sent, I believe, for mental evaluation to Patton State Mental Hospital, which he will be transferred to within days of the arraignment, and he will be sent there for an evaluation. And if it's determined by them that he's incompetent to stand trial, he will then need to essentially be there until he is either fully committed, which would be if he's not deemed competent in 2 years, he will be then committed to Patton State Hospital. And then, or the charges will be dropped, which I don't believe they will drop the charges. So he'll be committed to Patton State Hospital. And then from there, they will see, he'll either be there for the rest of his life if he's never able to be brought back to sanity, or if he's brought back to competency, the court will be notified and he'll be brought back to court to face these charges. And then the trial will progress. And you see, that is a very interesting process in and of itself. But right now, Redmond O'Neal is about to return to court this coming in the month of January. He'll be back in court and he'll be facing a judge, and the charges will be being reinstated, and they will begin the process of putting him on trial for his actions back in 2018. Now, we talked about here that there was as I told you, there was a sealed medical order that got signed, and what we can take from that. And Professor Deborah Deno at Fordham Law, that her take on this is that even though that this came in, that the fact that she believes that it might be difficult for Nick Reiner, to be declared incompetent to stand trial because of his attendance at the um, Conan O'Brien Christmas party, although all reports were something was wrong with him. He was going around asking people 3 questions: what's your name, what's your profession, and are you famous? He got into an argument with Bill Hader from Saturday Night Live. So by all means and all reports, things were not normal at that party. So I think he will absolutely be declared, at least temporarily, incompetent to stand trial. I think that's going to be the first move that's going to be happening. Now, once that happens, he will eventually, I believe, one day be restored to competency. When that happens, in California, they have what's called a bifurcated trial for insanity cases. It's not one trial, it's 2. And it's very interesting how this goes. So phase 1 is the guilt trial. The state has to come to court and they have to make a case beyond a reasonable doubt that he did this. And this defense can't raise a mental health defense at that point. What they can do is they can introduce mental health from the standpoint of how it affects the mens rea of the case. In other words, how it affects the mental state in how it deals with intent. In other words, is there something that can, and we saw this in the Dominguez case, is the way he's viewing things. In that case, it was he saw what he thought were demons, and he got angry at the demon and went over and attacked it. And the defense's allegations were that scenario, that if the jury adopted, that he believed that he was seeing these things, and he got angry at them, that the scenario that was presented, you don't look at it as the human being that he took out. You look at it under the scenario of, if this is what he really believed, then in that scenario, it's a manslaughter case. He was not doing it out of an ill intent to kill. He was doing it in a heat of passion. And like, it was so hard for that jury to try to navigate all of that stuff that they never made it past phase 1. And that was in the Dominguez case. That was he was a college student who suffered some major mental health issues, and it was a stabbing case. And he went out and he did similar things to what Nick Reiner did. And again, phase 1, they had a mistrial. They had a hung jury. The jury could not decide. They were unable to decide on even what to find him guilty of. So they ended up declaring a mistrial, and that's going to be coming back to trial at some point in 2026. So now, once you get past phase 1, once guilt is established, you have the sanity trial. And after the guilty verdict, that is when the schizophrenia diagnosis, medication changes, psychiatric history, that's when all of that gets presented. And the defense is going to try to prove at that time that Nick didn't understand what he was doing and couldn't distinguish right from wrong. The prosecution is then going, so essentially what's going to happen is the defense will need to present by a preponderance of evidence that he didn't know right from wrong and that the psychiatric history issues. Then the state will then, I think they will reach that standard, then the state will bring their own experts in who they will then need to disprove the sanity issue by beyond a reasonable doubt to show that there's no doubt as to whether or not Nick Reiner knew right from wrong. So again, it is a difficult hill to climb because of the fact that you have to show not just that you were mentally ill, but that your mental illness didn't allow you to find right from wrong. Rest assured, with the resources that Alan Jackson will be dealing with and that this family will have, and with the history that this young man have, I think it will be an easier road than many others would have. But they've got to show that the state has to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not know right from wrong, or that he did know right from wrong, and that the mental illness did not play a factor in that. In other words, he was schizophrenic, but he made a decision and he understood what he was doing was wrong and still did it. It's, in my opinion, this is the stuff that needs to be reevaluated. It's ridiculous. It's pulling straws, and it's like this in many states. And I've covered actually quite a few cases where this has come up, and it really, every single time when I see it, I'm like, it doesn't make sense the way they try to apply this. But this is the way. This is what they do. This is the law, and then you expect lay people, jurors, to come in and try to parse all of this in a jury room where they don't have years of legal education. They haven't gone and studied the law for 3 years in law school and taken 4 years of college courses of pre-law. They haven't gone out and had years of time of understanding these things. They're supposed to get back to a room and understand all these little nuances that these lawyers have fought to say, well, this is what makes you insane. This is what doesn't make you insane. Well, at this moment he knew this. Well, that, it's ridiculous. To me, I think it should be about, come in there and look at this look at this as in entirety, apply some common sense to it, and say, all right, this guy is schizophrenic, he's mentally ill, he's very clearly should not be treated like every other person that commits this crime. Okay, he made and now he also shouldn't be treated like everybody else who gets found not guilty. He doesn't get to just walk home. He has to go get himself treatment, and he has to get taken care of. But that is what he's looking at. So as we progress here, that's going to be what's on the table here when he comes to court on the 7th. If he is deemed incompetent to stand trial, it could be 2 years, it could be 7 years. In the Dominguez case, it took him about 2 years to come back, and a doctor panel came 2-1 and voted him competent to stand trial, and he was allowed to stand trial. So this case is going to drag on for a while, and it's going to be a very devastating situation for him, especially as he comes back to figuring out what he did. And when they bring him back to competency, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. Give me a moment here. We're going to pull up, go back to the previous article. So this is in the article there, what awaits Nick Reiner, and we call this A Voice from the Other Side. Now go to a publication, if you look it up, Google it up, Mad in America. The author of an essay, his name is Issa Ibrahim, and he ran an essay in Mad of America. And when I read this, it stopped me cold. It really did. It was like, wow, this is unbelievable, because he talks about how he had a psychotic break and he ended up unaliving his mother. He spent 19 years institutionalized. He's now an author. He's an advocate. He's recovered. So it actually shows that, yes, people can recover from this. He was a certified paranoid schizophrenic. He was addicted to marijuana. He inadvertently, in a botched exorcism attempt, took his mother's life. Now, he talks about how devastating this was and the process that he went through, the guilt, the shame. As he said it pursued him like the furries from Greek mythology. He said, it polarized his family. It made him a pariah. And then on top of that, he describes the path Nick Reiner's facing. He goes to prison, and he serves a sentence in prison of some sort. And he said, you have one eye on your calendar looking at counting your days to release, and the other eye, he's looking for shanks or booty bandits. I mean, what a way to put it. But he says that's one thing. Or the other side is he's found insane. And now, even if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity, you don't have a release date. He could be there for the rest of his life. I believe Sirhan's still in there. He was found not guilty by reason of insanity of the death of Bobby Kennedy. And he's still there, I do believe. And it's very difficult in California to ever get parole when you have parole and a life sentence, or to ever get released if you're found not guilty by reason of insanity. And one of the reasons why is because you've demonstrated that your mental illness, the worst consequences that could have happened. So they're not going to just release you. We even saw the Slender Man case where the little girl there, Morgan, I can't remember her last name, but she was released for a little while. She was found not guilty by reason of insanity, and she didn't last long. She's now going back to serve a 40-year sentence. She waived all of her. We're going to be covering that in a segment on here, but she waived all of her rights, waived her right to a hearing, and is now going to go back, and she's got a 40-year sentence in front of her. Now she'll be able to go before the court again at some later stage, but she wasn't ready to be released. So she didn't like being released under the supervision she had to live under. So it is not a life. Getting found not guilty by reason of insanity is not a life that is easy. He'll never have an easy life again. He'll never be Rob Reiner's son, whom he made movies with, whom he has a chance at having a successful life like he did, when all he had to do was beat whatever demons he had, and his dad was going to be there, and one day inheritance was going to be there, and he was going to have an incredibly easy life going forward. Now, he talks about the weight that is going to be on the shoulders of Nick Reiner, and that's what I was just talking about. And he says that he hopes that Nick Reiner will take the moment to go back and watch his father's interviews and realize that his dad would forgive him. His dad understands what happened here, and that Nick Reiner doesn't do anything rash before he realizes. Now, as we come in, the final part we're going to talk about right now, what happens on January 7th? So there's a couple questions we're going to get answered, potentially, we hope. And will he enter a plea? Meaning he has a right to a speedy arraignment. He waived his right to a speedy arraignment, so we know his defense is not worried about bringing this thing to trial right away. Will the defense raise competency concerns? And if that happens, what type of delay are we going to be looking at? And will the DA announce a penalty on a death penalty decision? I believe DA Hochman. I believe one of these three, and I believe it will be that one, should be probably rectified very quickly, because I believe DA Hochman will probably take that off the table. Now, they may not. So the only reason why I would see them not at this stage would be simple pressure to get a plea bargain at some stage, to say, listen, we'll give you a plea bargain. You can plead guilty and you agree to serve the rest of your life in prison, and we spare you your life. That would be the only scenario where I would say that they might continue to hold back on making that decision, or they decide to keep it on the table. But I think in a case like this, where there's mental illness issues, there's mental health issues, again, just like with the case we covered in a previous segment on the young kid that was in a car accident out in Las Vegas, these are not the cases the death penalty is made for. These are the cases that we absolutely should be reserving life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. And it's a decision of, does he spend the rest of his life in a mental hospital and under the care of doctors and ensuring that he doesn't ever have a chance to do what he did to his parents, or does he go to prison for the rest of his life? Those are the two options. I don't believe we should be even considering putting someone with the potential, and we know he's got a mental defect. He was declared that walking in the door. So I hope Nathan Hochman, especially with the family not being in support of it, this would be purely bloodlust and political if he were to choose to proceed with the death penalty under these conditions. Now, look, this is where we stand with this case. We will be covering the hearing, whether if it's able to be covered on, where we can show it to you. We will do that. The cameras in the courtroom have come under fire a little bit in this case by the judge. They didn't want Nick Reiner being shown on camera in his vest. And it was a little bit weird on who had rights to it and all that stuff. So I kind of stayed away from that initial appearance. And I'm hoping it becomes a clear path of how a broadcasting. If it isn't, we will cover it in news segments, and we will continue to talk about this, because this is an important case that I think has important potential ramifications for the mental health community and the way we handle mental illness in this country. And I hope this case, with the resources the Reiners had, with the history that this young man has, if there was ever a case that could truly move the needle and demonstrate the need for reform in this area, this is the case. And I hope that they press forward. And, even with the Redmond O'Neal case, I don't know who's helping Redmond out these days. I don't know what his resources are. I don't think he was in great shape with his dad. I don't know where all that's going to go. We're going to be watching that as well and seeing how that unfolds. But I think these are cases where, both of these cases where late in the game, the mental health diagnosis came, and the mental health system got distracted with labeling drugs as the problem. And they didn't look underneath and say, well, sometimes drugs are masking mental illness. And when someone can't defeat that, there's a lot of times that's an indicator that there's something more that needs to be explored. But to see it fail with someone who had the resources that the Reiners had is truly an indictment of the system itself. Anyways, with that said, guys, look, it is in due process we trust, and that is who the Reiner family and Nick Reiner will need to put their faith in, that Alan Jackson will ensure due process for Nick Reiner. And if that happens, due process oftentimes is equal to, if you get your due process in court, if that is ensured, fairness is ensured as well, and we can trust that the outcome will absolutely be fair and just. And that is what my dad fought for. That is what we're ensuring here. That's what we're watching for. So I'll leave you with that. And until we talk again, guys, let justice prevail, and I'll be talking to you soon.
The system's rigged, man, it's time to break free. Eyes wide open, gotta see what I see. Standing on the front lines, fighting for the truth. Lift the veil of lies, it's time to be the proof. Take a stand, don't you back down. Raise your voice, let's shake the town. We're the voices that won't be ignored. Breaking chains, yeah, we're ready.